In 2017, federal agents raided a townhouse in Albany, New York. What they found inside wasn't what you'd expect from one of the fastest-growing self-improvement organizations in America. They found branding equipment, medical-grade tools used to permanently mark human beings, and a membership list containing some of the most educated, accomplished, and intelligent people in the country. Doctors, lawyers, CEOs, actresses, heirs to billion-dollar fortunes. Every single one of them had paid thousands of dollars for the privilege. This is the story of NXIVM, and it is the single most complete blueprint for how intelligent people are turned against themselves ever documented in modern history. If you watched part 1 of this series, you already know the psychological mechanisms that make smart people vulnerable. Today, we're going to watch every single one of those mechanisms used in real time, on real people, with devastating effect, and by the end, you'll understand something that most people never do. Manipulation at this level doesn't feel like manipulation, it feels like the best decision you ever made. Let's go back to the beginning. A man named Keith Raniere holds his first workshop in a rented conference room in Albany. He calls the program Executive Success Programs, ESP. On the surface, it looked like any other self-help seminar. Leadership techniques, emotional intelligence, overcoming limiting beliefs, reaching your full potential. The kind of language you'd find in any airport bookshop. But Raniere had built something else inside that language, something invisible, a system so carefully engineered that even the people trapped inside it couldn't see it. Here is exactly how it worked. Stage 1. The hook. Make them feel exceptional. NXIVM didn't recruit through desperation, they recruited through aspiration. Recruiters, who were called coaches, were trained to identify high achievers, people who were already successful but felt something was missing, people who believed they could go further. The opening pitch was never join our group, it was always a personal invitation from a trusted friend. I took this course, and it completely changed how I think. I thought of you immediately. I think you'd get a lot out of it. Notice the structure of that sentence. It flatters your intelligence, it implies exclusivity, and it uses the most powerful force in human social psychology, a trusted personal referral. You weren't being recruited, you were being selected. There is no more effective manipulation trigger than making someone feel they were handpicked. Stage 2. The investment. Make them pay before they understand. The first course cost between $2,000 and $5,000. That price point was not accidental. Psychologists call it the sunk cost effect. Once you invest something significant, your brain automatically begins working to justify that investment. Not because the thing is worth it, but because the alternative, admitting you were wrong, is psychologically unbearable, and the smarter you are, the harder your brain works to build the justification. By the time the first seminar was over, something else had happened too. You'd been in a room for 5 days with people exactly like you, ambitious, intelligent, accomplished. And they all seemed to believe this was extraordinary. That social proof from people you respected was worth more than any sales pitch. Stage 3. The ladder. There is always a next level. NXIVM ran on a sash system, 12 levels, 12 colored sashes, just like a martial arts belt system. Each level required more courses, more money, more time, more commitment. But here's the part that made it genuinely brilliant from a manipulation standpoint. Each level also gave you status over the people below you, and responsibility for recruiting and teaching them. You weren't just a member, you were a coach, a leader, a guardian of the knowledge. Your identity was now fused with the organization. To leave NXIVM would mean dismantling who you had become inside it. And intelligent people, people who had built complex reasoned worldviews, were the slowest to do that because they had the most to lose. Stage 4. The secret. Now comes what they never told you at the start. Within the upper levels of NXIVM existed a secret inner group. Members were told it was an exclusive sorority, an elite circle for the most committed women in the organization. What they weren't told was that membership required providing collateral, compromising photographs, damaging personal secrets, legal documents signed under false pretenses, material that could destroy your career. your family, your reputation. All of it handed voluntarily to a person you completely trusted. Voluntarily. That word is important because this is the moment that separates NXIVM from every ordinary cult. They had engineered a system so thorough, so gradual, and so intelligent that by the time the collateral was requested, the member believed it was their own idea. They had reasoned their way into the trap, using their own intelligence as the mechanism of their imprisonment. Now I want to tell you about one specific person. I'm not going to use her real name. What I will tell you is that she held a postgraduate degree, ran a successful business, and by any external measure was exactly the kind of person who should have known better. She entered NXIVM looking for professional development. She left 4 years later with a brand burned into her skin. In her testimony, she described the process not as something that happened to her, but as something she watched herself choose, step by step, each decision feeling reasonable in isolation. Each one making the next decision feel slightly more inevitable, and she said something in that testimony that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. She said, "I kept thinking, I'm a smart person. I would know if something was wrong." That sentence, that single sentence, is the thesis of everything we covered in Part 1. NXIVM operated for over 20 years. It expanded to Mexico, Canada, and the United Kingdom. At its peak, it claimed over 17,000 members, the majority of whom were educated professionals. Keith Raniere was convicted in 2019 on federal charges including sex trafficking, racketeering, and forced labor. He was sentenced to 120 years in prison. But here is what I don't want you to walk away thinking. I don't want you to think NXIVM was extreme, a one-off, a monster with an obvious face, because the mechanisms NXIVM used are not unique to NXIVM. They are the same mechanisms used by high-control political movements, high-pressure sales organizations, certain tech companies, some religious institutions, anywhere a charismatic individual or organization wants your loyalty more than they want your well-being. The packaging changes, the product changes, the mechanism never changes. So what does recognition actually look like in the real world? How do you identify these patterns before you're inside them? There are 5 reliable markers that appear across almost every documented high-control group and manipulation system. First, the leader or system claims special access to truth that outsiders cannot understand. Second, doubt or questioning is framed as a personal failing. You're not enlightened enough yet. Third, there is always a next level, always more to invest, more to commit, more to sacrifice before the real reward comes. Fourth, your relationships outside the group are slowly devalued, questioned, or discouraged. Fifth, leaving feels not just difficult, but morally wrong, like betraying something sacred. If you encounter 3 or more of those markers in any group, organization, or relationship, the right response is not to investigate further, it's to leave, because at that point, every additional day you spend understanding the system is another day the system spends understanding you. Here is the final thing I want to leave you with. The people who escaped NXIVM, the ones who eventually got out, weren't the ones who were least intelligent. They weren't the most skeptical, or the most suspicious, or the most emotionally distant. The ones who got out earliest shared one specific trait. They had people outside the group who they trusted completely and spoke to regularly. Not to convince them of anything, just to stay in contact with a reality that the group wasn't curating. That's it. That's the protection. Not more intelligence, not more skepticism, not more research, just one person outside the bubble who knew you before it started. Keep those people, talk to them. Stay curious about their reality, even when yours feels more exciting. Because the moment any group, any idea, or any person starts pulling you away from the people who knew you first, that is the signal, not the content of what they're telling you, not how intelligent the argument sounds. Just that, the pulling, that is the one signal that has never been wrong. NXIVM collapsed, not because its members became less intelligent. It collapsed because the people inside it finally found their way back to someone who remembered who they were before. Remember that. In part 3 of this series, we go even deeper. We're going to look at the psychological playbook used not by cults, but by the most powerful advertising and political machines in the world. The same techniques, the same mechanisms, just at a scale of millions instead of thousands. Subscribe so you don't miss it, because after this series, you'll never look at the world the same way again.